Hey, so this is Daniel here. Before you enjoy this episode, um, we just wanted to acknowledge that this is being recorded during the WGA SAG-AFTRA strike. We are not influencers in the sense that we do not have any relationship with any studios. We are not being paid to talk about this. We are just two enthusiastic friends providing critical analysis of media that we really like. But we do want to make it clear in no uncertain terms that we do stand with WGA SAG-AFTRA. We are standing in solidarity. We believe that they are making very reasonable requests. If you listen to our shows, you know that we are already on that side of um, moving more towards socialism anyway, and making sure that people are aware of the ills of capitalism. I understand the paradoxical nature of um, enjoying things from these huge companies, but you'll hear anytime we notice them speaking to our more left-leaning values, and we are definitely excited seeing actors start to speak about some of our values as well in terms of trying to take back the means of production and making things a bit more equal, and not just talking about money, but uh, as I said, making sure that they have more autonomy and not being scanned for AI so that they have even less control of their tools to work. So yeah, this is an ever-changing situation, I believe. We've heard a lot of different things about what's okay and what's not okay, but we firmly believe that without the labor of the writers and actors who are currently on strike, the stuff that we like would not happen. So if we find out that this is something we shouldn't be doing anymore, we will stop right away. But for now, we will continue to voice our opinions on these works, obviously without any incentive from studios, because we are not working with them. We do not want to have a relationship with them at this point, because they are rejecting very reasonable demands from WGA and SAG-AFTRA. All right, thank you very much and enjoy the episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome and welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. Yeah, so we recorded our last episode kind of in the midst of the actor strike being uh called, and now we are doing this in the midst of it. So yes, we know the writers have been striking for almost 3 months.
Mhm.
WGA SAG-AFTRA is striking now, or has been. This
They've
is their
joined
first full week.
forces.
They've joined
Yes,
forces. We stand in solidarity with them.
absolutely.
Meaning, and this is up top of this episode as well, but meaning
Mhm.
if things change, we might just stop doing the podcast until things are settled. But at the
Mhm.
moment, as we understand it, we are giving critical analysis of work that wouldn't be able to be made without SAG-AFTRA and WGA, their labor.
Mhm.
Again, we stand with them, and we don't have any relationship with any studio. We are not being asked to do this. There is no
Mhm.
exchange of money. These are just two friends who are passionate about this stuff, giving our critical analysis as always.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
But for now, this is Secret Invasion episode 5.
Harvest. Excellent. All
Harvest.
right. So
1 for 1 this time, baby. We got it.
it starts with Nick Fury's he's accompanying the president as he's rushed into the hospital, and he's trying to make it clear, like, look, this wasn't the Russians, and do not trust Colonel Rhodey.
Yeah.
So
He
glad
seems
that he got that.
frantic when that's happening. It's just like, this is This is why
I
people think that you're insane right now.
yes, he does seem frantic, but also he has the like wherewithal to be like, I'm not leaving, and
Of
I'm going to be
course.
blocking this entrance.
Yeah, yeah, and absolutely for the right reason, right? It's just like, hey, my friend's not dying for this. Like, no, you're not going to get this wrong.
Yeah,
Even if there's some consciousness right now before Rhodey gets there, and he's very right to be like, hey, but at the same time, it's just like, what do you think you're really going to do there, bud?
he does what he wants to do
He does what he
in a
wants to
later
do.
scene,
Yes,
but yes.
but here directly, not so much. It's just kind of like, what's happening? But yeah,
Next, we see Gravik, and he's also unwinding. Not as cool as he used to be.
nope.
His second in command is questioning him, rightfully so. A lot of
In
stuff is
front of
brought up,
people,
like
in front of all
because
his
he's like,
friends.
"Hey," Gravik says to his second in command, "Like, if you had got what we needed, I could have just completed this mission." And
Yeah.
the second in command is kind of like, "Would you have though? Because there's some people still alive that don't need to be alive right now,
Mhm.
and you've had a chance to kill them." Namely Nick Fury, but
Yeah.
like, and also he's clearly been feeding you bad information because everywhere you say to look, the harvest is not there. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it just seems like you should kill him, but you're not, and that's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like how he does this in front of everyone. And he's just like you see the fracture of like, oh, his allegiance and everything like that is starting to fracture away from Gravik, and it's just like he's more aligned to the cause. And I really like what's actually happening here. It's like, hey, this guy's kind of he's getting corrupted, and everyone else is kind of seeing that. But I don't
That's
think they
the.
thought this through
I
enough.
think that's the awkward thing about two things in this episode, but this is the first one. Just character portrayal right now. Like I'm not sure that this works for the Gravik we've known up to here. Like he is
Yeah.
visibly shook. Again, I can imply or infer a bunch of stuff based on having your father figure shoot you in the face, but
Mhm.
they haven't really, as I talked about last episode, they haven't really done anything overtly with that. And I think when
They
you
clearly
make your
haven't. Yeah.
penultimate episode only 30 minutes, basically,
Hmm.
you might have had some time to really lay the groundwork of like this is affecting him emotionally because his father figure shot him in the face. Like
Yeah.
right now it's just like, oh, he's the bad guy and we have to make sure he's the bad guy, and I don't think it
Yeah.
had to come off that way. I think they definitely could have like done a bit more with what I think is a germ of an idea that was planted earlier that they've never really followed up on.
Yeah, which has so much room because you're right. Like a quick flashback scene could have done so much to be like, oh, this is Fury and Gravik when they were kids, like back when they were first recruited, and like like him being the father of the figure, like you said, and actually leaning into that. Nope, it's just him on tilt now, and I'm like, this sucks because it was his plan to get the council to support him was so good, and then now it's just like now that he's got the power, it seems like he's just reacting to stuff constantly and being like, no, no, do this now. No, change the plan. And I'm like, yeah, the second in command is right to call him out in front of everyone. It just
Yeah,
sucks that
like
they
it
didn't
just
have a
feels like
plan.
he's spiraling, and I don't really feel
Yep.
like there's enough that has been clearly stated to show why he
Mm-hmm.
would spiral. Just like, unless you're saying everything has always gone well for him up until this
Mm-hmm.
point, and he
Yeah.
just really isn't that calm, cool, and collected. But I
Right.
don't, yeah, it just that doesn't really work for me. I thought that
It
was
doesn't.
kind of
Yeah.
a bummer that like they
Mm-hmm.
decided to go with, oh, he's just crazy now.
Yeah. Because it's in the past when it was like, hey, this happened and you didn't kill Fury. People were like, yeah, that's okay. Our goal was to do this. We
Mm-hmm.
did the goal. Why are you worried about Fury? Like that, I was like, okay, that made sense to me. Now you're not getting that ability anymore. There's no smoothness. There's no whatever. You just have all the power, and now you're just being the most insecure person with power ever, like everyone else,
Yeah,
right?
just he doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't feel like the Graphic from the other four episodes to
Exactly.
me in this episode. So
Yeah.
it was kind of a bummer, and we'll get to what ends up happening with him. But first, before
Yes.
that,
Kills him.
he gets a call. Well, yeah, sorry, he does kill
We,
the
we
second in command,
yeah,
but
we forgot to say that he kills the second.
he
Yeah.
kills the second in command with his
Yeah.
brute hand. But he I don't know if I don't remember if he gets a call or he calls Rhodey, and he's basically like, "Hey, we're pivoting now." Like as you kind of alluded to, like, "Hey,
Mhm.
we're gonna change plans. Tell the president that it was Russians with the help of Skrulls, and then
Yep.
show him where New Skrulls is."
Mhm.
With again, like this doesn't have to feel like a huge like, "Oh my god, he's really scrambling. This is his Hail Mary." This could have just felt like, yeah, like this. Okay, you did that, and now I'm gonna force your hand by doing this. Then, like the
Yeah.
same way, Don Cheadle wrote it. The Don Cheadle scroll was kind of like, okay, like you called me out, and now like you're gonna ask for help, but I have footage of you, so I'm good
Mhm.
still. Like my plan is gonna keep going. This graphic plan could have been seen as like, oh wow, like that's what he's willing to do to like do this, but this feels like he's flailing,
Yeah.
and again, it doesn't have to feel that way. It feels like he's like, I don't know, do this. When realistically, I could have seen if they'd played this a bit differently, him just being like,
Mhm.
now I'm escalating. This isn't me flailing. This is me being like, okay,
Mhm.
this is the next step to get to where we're going.
Yeah, yeah, because like he could have easily just said something like that, or just said something to indicate that he's like, "Don't worry, I got a plan." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that would have been a good plan to rally the rest of the Skrulls, for example, that are naysayers, to be like, "Hey, this is a peaceful settlement, and the humans attacked it. So what are the rest of us million gonna do?" Like, if he had some sort of allusion to that, I'd be like, "Okay, cool. He's he's spiraling from an emotional attack or whatever." But now I'm just like, no, he's completely lost it. The moment when he was like yelled war on the table and slammed down like a few episodes ago, I'm like, oh, that was the last time I remember him being like really composed. Because ever since then, he's been slipping his grip.
Um, yeah. So that's what he tells Rhodey to do, and I think Rhodey's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like, I
Doesn't
might be
like
on the
that.
wrong side here.
Yeah.
I think I picked the wrong guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, his scroll name is Rava. I forgot to say that, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't want to keep just saying the one. So yeah, we don't see Rava in scroll form this episode, but she's getting a
She's
lot of work
doing
done,
her
and
villain
not
thing.
in a frantic way.
Yeah. It's
She's
such a good thing. It's just
yeah.
like even in the hallway scene, it's just like
Yeah, we'll get to
this
that.
is
I didn't
exact.
want to like, but I really do think that like that's the difference is
Mhm.
how anytime Rhodey pivots in this series, you're not like,
Mhm.
oh wow, he's really losing it. You're like, well, I guess he just really knows what he's like. This is how you get shit done.
Right, right, right. And I don't know if it's a commentary on like because like last episode we talked about whether or not him choosing me black was honoring him Fury or whatever, and you're like there's no use looking into that. But I'm like, okay, but is there a use looking into the aspect of the gender role of whatever? Because now that's Rhodey has been revealed to be a female Skrull and has been acting more feminine in the portrayal. It's been much more interesting to see how it's been more cool, collected, and like, no, this is the backup plan. And also like Sonia Fallsworth having that same thing. It's like, yeah, no, I'm collecting myself right now. I'm taking a back seat and then I'm getting together. And then I'm like, we'll talk about her obviously later on in the episode. But like is this more of a portray and Priscilla later on, it's like, is this more of a portrayal of like a commentary on men versus women with like power and adjacent to power? It seems more that than a commentary on what they're being like. Here's what we want to say about race and what the Skrulls did. It's weird.
I don't know that I agree that
Mm.
Don the Rhodey performance is more feminine now. I think he's been pretty even.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't mean feminine means you're not even. I mean I don't see a change in the performance. So the
Right.
performance has been the same the whole time.
Yeah. I guess
And I
because we are getting more of it,
yes,
the
but I
villain
think he's
aspect.
been the same. Like he's been sassy the whole time. Like
That's
he's
true.
kind of out of pocket the whole time
That's true.
in that sense.
Mhm.
But you could be right. I think um, I would again be like, I think they just made this choice because they're like, well, they just needed someone high up in the government. Because at
Mm.
first I was like, well, they could have just got Maria Hill if they really wanted to do commentary on women, but she's not high enough up, and she's the same as Nick Fury. They need someone high up in the government, And also, I think they wanted it to be a superhero, so I don't know if it was supposed to be like commentary on
Mm,
anything female, other than same thing with Gravik, right? Like, I don't know how much commentary they're trying to do in there. I think it was like
right.
he's the best for the role. This was a character that makes sense for
Mhm.
them to try and infiltrate.
Right, right. Okay. Yeah, like I guess whatever it is that we're reading, well, whatever that I'm reading into, I'm just projecting at that point. But I feel like there's something there. But I'll let that marinate more.
Yeah. What's next? Sorry about that. Just got a text. Uh, This is the what Fury's plan was, which was as
Mm.
Rhodey's coming in to talk to the president, he pins him against the wall, and I'm liking the energy that Nick Fury is giving him and everyone else in there. Like basically,
Yeah.
like I'm not afraid. Like want to do something. Like I've seen people be like, "Oh, does he want to die in that scene?" And I'm just like, I mean, I just think he's not afraid right now. He's like, "You've taken everything from me." So
Yeah. He's at a point of desperation.
yeah,
And also like, yeah, if this is a war, you have to be, you know, aware that chances of you dying are pretty high.
yeah. Well, I mean, he has that conversation
Yeah.
later as well. But yeah, this is him just being like, "I'm on to you, Rhodey," and Rhodey being like, again, just a nice pivot of,
Mhm.
okay, well, you pulled your gun, you're not gonna shoot, and I know you're not gonna shoot.
Mhm.
Like, and that's the only way you can prove I'm a Skrull is if you kill me and everyone sees in front of me.
Yeah.
But I will not pull a gun and not shoot. So remember that time when I said I'm gonna show everyone the footage? I'm doing that now. That's happening
Mhm.
in 60 seconds. And I was thinking, oh, is he scrambling? Like, is he just making it? I'm like, no, he really does send that footage out.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, yeah, see, like that is how you do villain stuff. Like,
Yes.
like I was just like, great, yeah, he. I know I keep saying he. It's for the purposes of the show. Yes,
Yeah.
Rhodey is a he. He's like, yeah, fuck you. You're not gonna like. You're never gonna stop me. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the thing. I feel like this is just the difference between like having a plan and actually doing it versus being like screaming, I have a plan, and not actually having a plan and just reacting to stuff, right?
Yeah, and
I'm
I
more
think
threatened by Rhodey than Graphic at this point,
at this
100%.
point, yes, and then it wasn't always that the case. Like you were always like,
Mhm.
well, I mean, Rhodey is acting on behalf of Graphic, so he ultimately has the plan. But it's
Yeah.
just like like they don't agree on how to get this done,
They clearly don't.
and I was even at one point. I guess I should wait for this until we get to the scene. But like,
Mhm.
yeah, it's like yeah, they don't agree on this, and this seems like Rhodey just acting on his own. This is like the
I
whole
agree.
I'm releasing the footage, and
Yep.
if you ever come close to the president again, like all these people, like we're gonna act on it. Like I already pulled the one gun, and here's
Mhm.
the next gun I'm like
Yeah.
showing you.
Right. Right. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, like, yeah, Rhodey's acting on their own, but at this point, it's just the idea of like whether or not Gravik would care about that versus the ability to kill Fury. It just doesn't seem to matter. It just like the number two called him out for. It's like, hey, you're really incompetent in doing this one thing that you criticize other people about not being able to do. It's just like, what up with that? Um,
Yeah. Then we get to see Sonya. She's 2 for 3 in this episode. I think this scene is great where she goes up against the SAS director.
yeah,
And I was like, oh, wouldn't it suck if she got it wrong and the scroll, like, that's not a scroll? Because she's like, kind of like waiting for him to turn green. I'm like, okay, there we go. Because I was like,
yeah.
oh, like that would really suck. But yeah, she, and obviously in the previously on, they already showed that she knew who the scroll was. But
Mhm.
I was just like, still, like, imagine if she just got it wrong.
That would
um,
be so funny.
just,
Oh, that would
like
be
just
very, very
watching her
funny.
have to like pivot from that. But anyway, she doesn't need to. She got it right, and
Dead
that's
on
how she
right.
gets information on how to meet up with the Daltons later
Yeah.
in the episode.
And I love how quickly she de-escalates the situation with like no security guards or anything. It's like, hey, guess what? Now that you know that he's a Skrull, there's no actual policy on
Hmm.
killing Skrulls, so you're not protecting the person you thought you were.
Yeah, like
It's
this isn't the person you thought it was, so
yeah, it's
I can
just
just kill this scroll.
that. Oh, I love her so much. She's in later on in the episode too. She does it again, like really, really
Yeah,
well.
As I said,
God,
two for
she's
three
the
this episode.
best. 2 for 3. You're absolutely right.
Uh, but yeah, that's how she gets the location, and I like the way she operates, and because like the
Oh
guy's
gosh,
he's
straight
watching
to
the
it.
footage of Fury that was leaked,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, "Whoa, how many scrolls do you think there are?" And she's like, "I think they're bloody everywhere, sir." And then it's great, great stuff. Uh, yeah. Now we get up against the attempted coup on Gravik,
Yeah,
which I was like, did like
this was
Rava Rhodey do this? And I don't
yeah.
think that is the case.
I don't think it's the case because I
Based
thought it would have
on
been more
later on in the
effective.
episode, Rava Rhodey just doing what was asked of them,
Yeah,
but I was just like, yeah, like I get where it's coming from. Don't get me wrong. And I'm just like, wow,
percent.
that was very quickly mobilized. Like,
Yeah,
and that's probably why it didn't work. But I'm just like, oh, they didn't even
yeah,
show people like being like, should we do this? They just went straight to they're upset and they're turning
yeah,
on him, which is
yeah,
fine. Like I will bring up that maybe having this be one of the shorter episodes was not a great idea, but again, like we
yeah.
you were I'm willing to go with them on yes. They've shown how fractured the scrolls are, and just like humans, that's not like a knock against scrolls, but like
Mm-hmm.
so it makes sense that there would be people being like, wait, maybe we like maybe he's not the best person to be leading our cause.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I appreciate them having that ability to be like, hey, it's not a monolith of people. Like this whole um series has been about like identity and how monoliths don't really exist and all that kind of
mhm.
stuff. And this they're doing such a great job. But you're right, it's such an escalating point. There's no like, hey, let's send notes to each other. And I don't need that for like a 38-minute episode. I'm like, yes, get to this part. I wish there was more time in this episode,
Yeah,
100%.
that
Because I
was
when I was reviewing when I would sat down to watch this, I'm like, do I have enough time? I've only got an hour before my next meeting. I looked at it, I'm like, 38. What?
yeah,
This is
it's
going to be a
39
problem.
minutes, and a lot of that is previously on and the like 10-minute credits, so it's not
Yes,
like it's short.
it's a
Um,
short episode.
but like I just they yeah, it's such a quick escalation to we're gonna kill Gravik. And yeah, the
Well,
episode, the scene before, he's talking about how you guys are, you're nameless, you're voiceless, which again didn't really feel like what his vibe was beforehand.
no, because he was
Um,
like, no, it's not for me, it's for us. Now he's being like, no, I'm putting y'all down
and
because
I will
y'all
say
aren't
this doesn't feel like he's showing his true colors. Like it didn't feel like that's what they were leading to. It just felt like
right.
someone was like, he's the bad guy. This,
Yeah,
just make him the bad guy.
just do bad guy
It
things now.
doesn't feel like that's what I'll put it on the actor too. It doesn't feel like that's what the actor was alluding to in any previous performances, and
Mm-hmm.
it didn't feel like that was in the writing either. This feels just like whatever. It's a comic book show. He's the villain. He's gonna do villain stuff now. Like he was already doing villain stuff. I understand, but you can always sympathize with people taking radical action to
Mm-hmm.
get the change they want versus him actively now being terrible to the people who follow him.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because it's just like the moment he killed the second in command dude, I was just like, yeah, you've lost your own support base now. Like, because you did it in front of
It's
everyone
the
too.
killing and the like putting them down. It's
Yes.
because it's not even like he killed them and was like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then you're like, "There's no walking that back." He just
Yeah.
never felt the need to,
She doesn't
like,
address it or anything like
yeah,
that.
it was just like he's
He's
fucking
become
dead, and you
Fury.
guys need to shut up about everything and just do as you're
Yeah.
told.
Yeah. He's essentially become Fury to what he's criticized Fury about, the idea of using other people, all that kind of stuff, being self
I
involved. I'm
guess
like,
maybe that's where they were going with it. I just think that I think you're right. This isn't me disagreeing with you. It's more
right.
it's a shame
They're
they
not doing a
didn't
good
lead
enough
up to
job.
this. It's
Mhm.
a very interesting idea, and that I think works better in Black Panther of the revolution or the supposed
Yes.
revolutionary that has actually just become what they hate.
Absolutely. Yes.
But I don't
Because
think this had the right runway to that.
I agree, and that I feel like that's the only way where I'm like, okay, this is where he feels like he's losing control because he's becoming Fury. But I'm giving a lot of leeway there. I'm
Mm-hmm.
putting that out there to be like, this is what I think. are you right? And then like them being like, yes, let's go with that because that sounds better than what we actually edited out here, which is a lot of stuff that they edited out.
Well, I can only
Or
assume.
yeah,
Like,
only
yeah, I
assume,
can
but
only assume.
this needed more episode for sure.
Um,
Because there's so much setup. Like you and I have discussed already the potential father figure thing, and now this thing with Gravik. It's just like Gravik's a very underwritten character at this point, but previously
he
was
feels
well
this
written.
way now that we've gotten this far into the show. That you're like, oh
Exactly.
yeah, this is. They had a lot going for him, and then
Mhm.
decided to do this,
I
which is a shame. And
agree.
I'm assuming we're not going to feel better about it next episode.
I agree with that. I also feel like part of me is like, okay, we Gravik was heavy, carrying a lot of the momentum of the series when Fury was down and out, getting criticized, doing his thing. Now that Fury's back, apparently, he's Gravik is taking that back seat, and I'm just like, this is sucky. I want the writing for
Well, it's
both
not
these
that he's taking
characters
a
to be
back seat.
good.
He's got a lot to do in
No, in
this
terms of
episode. It's
writing.
more just it's just like, oh, you guys skipped a lot to
Yeah,
get
you're
here.
going from point A to point B now, and that sucks because I'm like,
Yeah, like I
do the
agree.
villain thing, like you said.
They skipped too
Mhm.
much. But yeah, he ends up killing the new recruit from the first episode.
Yep,
And really doubling down on talking about how useless these scrolls are, which
yep.
and not a good idea.
Not a good idea. No,
And I mean
no.
that from a writing point. I like if they want to hide behind, oh, he just went crazy, fine. But I think that's a poor writing choice.
Right.
Yeah. Then we see Fury meeting up with Gaia in what I can only assume is that area that they had the flashback where
Yeah.
Fury first met um Gravik.
The original, like, oh god,
Where they
recruitment
had that
place.
whole where he made his promise. And
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that.
He's like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna
Yeah.
do. Yeah, the
That's where he
recruitment
meets up
center.
with Gaia again, and she's kind of like, yeah, like I, I already like I ran away from my dad because I knew he was going to lose,
His plan sucked.
and I,
She says that. It's crazy.
yeah, I don't know, I don't falter on that. It's just,
I don't, but
yeah,
it seems like they're
and
actually
she
building it
already
up to
last
make it.
episode kind of was like, you're delusional, man. Like I know that
Yeah,
that comes back in this episode, but it's just like, yeah, he didn't have a great idea. He was just like, let's just keep playing their game, and then they'll see what our worth is when that
but here's the
shit.
thing: if Ritson survives now, that might actually happen, which is stupid. Which is
No,
stupid.
you can't look at it as in that thing of like, okay, so like that would be the equivalent of being like, so when all the civil rights stuff happened, then black people were treated perfectly, and there was no need to discuss it any further. Like
Yeah,
that doesn't change people's minds about scrolls or black people in this case. And obviously, this is written so you can place any minority in there. So yes,
right.
there can be a president that feels sympathetic and is like, well, let's not treat them like dogs anymore. Like that's, but
Yeah,
that doesn't
I
mean,
100% get what
yeah.
you're saying. Like
So
it's
that's what I
good on
mean by he had a
paper,
bad
but
idea.
sentiment, yeah,
But that's why I
it's
mean,
not
like,
going to shift.
that was a bad idea. Like it will
100%.
never. That's not gonna work.
But what I'm saying is like the idea, if we're just the plan to get everyone home, if that was his plan to be like, oh, okay, as soon enough we sacrifice, we literally martyr ourselves, and they'll see that sacrifice and whatever. I'm like, at this point, I'm given how they've written Gravik, I'm like, that might actually be the conclusion of this series. They don't like that at all. That Ritson's going to be like, oh, a scroll actually tried to save my life. Well, I'm going to do this. But
I
I
still
really
think
hope
that
that's not.
talks to what they're discussing here, which is
Yeah,
the um the thought that you have to earn being treated as an equal as a
exactly.
minority, that you will just, like we suffer for a bit, and then we'll they'll just see that we're good people as
Yeah,
opposed to treating another human like you would want to be treated. And I
yeah.
understand that they are scrolls, they're not humans, but it's an allegory.
It's
So
definitely an
so like
allegory, 100%.
so yes, in this case I don't feel stupid saying that. It is This is clearly an allegory.
Yeah,
But yeah,
100%. It's like you said earlier, you could put like any racial group in there. I mean, like just look at Canadian history. It's just like, okay, put any racial group in here that has who hasn't played the model minority thing.
Except for
It's
you can't put like First Nation indigenous people because they were here first. So
well, I'm
that
not. Yeah, that's 100% not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
well, I'm
like
just saying you can't
you know,
put anyone there.
right. But it's just rough because I'm like, yeah, it's just the model minority. It's never a thing. No,
Yeah,
it's
but I still appreciate that the show is digging into that, and
they're exploring that
yeah,
perspective,
it's being
which is
explored.
cool. Yes.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like there's important stuff. Yeah,
Which, to
yeah.
that
Guy
point.
is basically dealing with my dad died on this fucking planet where we're not even respected, and it's gonna amount to nothing. And
Yep. She's
again,
pissed.
just giving her more depth of like
Mhm.
you already knew why she's separated, and now it's like this is worst case scenario of
Yep.
like I mean, even though I said this was what would happen, it's not. This is not what I wanted.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's a tough scene to watch because it's very much her being like, yeah, I was right, and dealing with the consequences of, and I wasn't there to try to help either.
Yeah, like she's it. Well, I think we get to that one by the time she
Mhm.
gets to Priscilla. But for this
Yes, of
part,
course.
it's definitely just I was right, but that doesn't make me happy. Like there's no solace in being right about that. This sucks.
Yeah,
I'm very
yeah,
upset that this happened.
yeah. Like when I tell people this, I'm like, I'm usually right about things, but I don't want to be because I'm such a cynic that I'm like, that's terrible to want to be right about cynical crap. So like, I hate being right sometimes, but I'm right a lot of the time because people just suck, and I go on that principle that I'm like, oh, this is gonna be the most medium interaction ever. But yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of this Fury speech either. The whole "this is your time now." I'm like, what the fuck is he
I
talking
hate it.
about?
I'm like, what are
I'm
you
not
doing?
into
Why are you
this.
doing this recruitment thing again in the same spot where you failed the first time?
Yeah,
Why are you doing it?
I'm not a fan of it.
I don't. You're
I
right.
think that he was. I don't know if there was different writers for this episode. Like I understand that if it's a writers' room, everyone touches it, but it just seems like the characterization of key characters was off in this episode. I would say
I just.
Gravik, Fury, and Sonya was
So I
just
don't know if
off in this.
I. I don't know if I agree with that. I do. Based on what they've shown us with Fury in this, him being like, I'm going to capitalize on your moment of weakness and inspire you and legitimize it my way is something that I'm like, okay, based on what we've seen, you would do, and it's something you've done in the past, and something that later on in this episode we find out you do try to take advantage of people at their weakest moments.
No, I
So I'm like,
disagree
I
with
can
that
10%
because
see it.
the whole thing that he's saying. So this is
Yeah.
why I'm talking about characterization is off.
Mhm.
The whole thing he's saying, this whole show, everything
Mhm.
he's doing is I have to do this by myself. He's no
Yes.
longer in recruitment mode. He's no longer trying to get more people on his side. He like Gaia isn't a pre-existing ally to him. She like
Mhm.
he knows her from Captain Marvel, but like that's
Mhm.
not a pre-existing ally that he's like working with. This is it feels off, and it feels like his performance and the writing feels like he's genuinely trying to inspire her to do better, as opposed
Mhm.
to other times where you can see in his performance that he's trying to recruit or he's trying to do something.
Mhm.
This feels off, is what I'm saying. It's the characterization is
Yeah,
off with him because that's not how he's playing it, and
for
also
sure.
at this time and in this episode, all his talk is about how he's done recruiting and this is something only he can do. The whole all my superpowers between my ears and wrapped around my finger, and if that's not enough, I don't know. Like that's his whole thing is I'm
It's
the one
true.
that's gonna have to stop this. Not
Yeah.
all right. So Gaia, take one for the team now.
Yeah. I mean, ugh. And if that's his way of being like, yeah, that was my way of moving a chessboard piece before the I'm like, you could say that because you're manipulative and
Yeah,
whatever, but I'm just like, at this point, it is it makes sense to me that he would do something like that. But you're right, the characterization of it's very, very it takes a weird beat.
yeah. I
It
think
does.
you're 100% right that that is what he would do. It's just this execution and in general characterization is off. It doesn't
Amen on
feel
that.
like, if we're talking about the point of a scene,
Yeah.
that's not what that felt like we were heading towards.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
another
I would have.
chess move.
Yeah, I would have appreciated it more if it was just like, I'm here to meet with Gaia to give her Talos's body so she can do what she to get the closure she and just be supportive. Like I would have loved
that's
for the
what-
character development there.
That's
But
what it
no,
feels like, because all
he's-
he's doing is saying like,
Yeah.
the whole point of them meeting is like, okay, you have your dad's body, go see Priscilla. She can actually do the burial for you.
Yes, but then he adds on that final bit. I'm like,
But that's why I'm saying that part is weird.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100% with you. I'm like, I wish, and that's just me being like, I wish, but I'm like, of course. When he did it at the end and it led a slimy thing, I'm like, of course you would try to get something for yourself out of this too. You can't just do the right thing. You just got to get a little something for yourself. That's on brand for him. But it's right. It's just like it leaves a very icky feeling on my skin afterwards.
We also, well, sorry, not we. Fury learns what's part of the Super Skrull serum. Again, weirdly, they only mention two things.
Yep.
And she
Called
doesn't even
Obsidian and
mention the
Groot, right?
extremis. So it was just kind of like, what?
Which she has.
Because like we haven't really seen what the Cull Obsidian of it all is. We've seen Groot and the extremis consistently, and she doesn't mention extremis. So I'm just like, yeah, just weird writing all over in this episode in terms of what they've tried to establish, and then this.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, Gaia doesn't trust Fury still. And I'm like,
my assumption is she had like an etc. or they said a list, and for some reason either she forgot to say the list, or just, and they're like, whatever, that's the best take.
So
or like,
my assumption is like, oh, she left out the power that she has. So, and she hasn't revealed it yet. Interesting. I thought it was a calculated
see that,
move.
except for the fact that she said Cull Obsidian. We haven't even seen that yet, so it's already like invoking a power that we haven't seen used yet. Yeah,
but again, that could be like a distraction thing. Either way, I'm just like, it feels incomplete. You're right, because at that point, I'm just like, at this point in the show, I'm like, are they acting like they still don't trust each other? Of course. So sure, maybe that makes sense. But you're right, it is inconsistent.
What they're doing, but your take is as valid as mine. I would imagine it's just nothing about the scene reads as we're doing spycraft right now. This is really just we're regrouping after a loss.
Yeah.
And so, she gives him the information on Supra, and what we get out of that is we learn that Nick Fury is relieved that he never did find the harvest, and that it is just stuff that he had to put together because he couldn't find the harvest. So it's not like we're completely ahead of the character, but
no. Definitely not. He's just like, oh, they didn't find. Oh, thank God. Yes. That's the reaction. I'm like, man, this is definitely not trying to polish up Fury in any good way, right?
He's like, well, that's a freebie.
You got lucky on that. Yeah, lucky on that.
So he mentions he's going to Finland. We don't know why then, but we do know now because we've seen the full episode. And we get another good Sonya scene, probably the last one. And it's of this episode, this episode, which is her approaching the Daltons and getting the information on what the Super Skrull machine does.
So good.
She's great. She burns down their lab. She gets a jab in at men, which I'm sure people won't like. But well, if they're not gaslighting you, they're threatening murder. This is what all podcasts are about. And I'm just like, geez, that's becoming more and more true. Like the more you read.
It is.
It's harder to deny that.
That's one of those
access
things.
to everyone's story.
Yeah, that's one of those things. It's like when these kind of statements are made, I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of truth to a lot of that.
Yeah,
and I'm just like, from her perspective too, that's a very, very true statement. It's just like, hey, when when any other race go like, hey, this is racist. And another particular race is like, no, it's not. We're like, oh yeah, okay.
Gaslight you or be like, shut up, I'll kill you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, this is exactly what she's talking about. It's just, this is And because men have been traditionally associated with power, that is that kind of response of, and Gravik does it. He's like, he kills you or he gaslights you.
Mm-hmm.
So Sonya calls out all the men in this episode, and I'm like, this is a very, very accurate thing to say. A lot of people don't like it, but they don't like the truth. No, but not a lot of people like the truth.
No. You brought up the race thing where I like to include women in that
Yep.
as well. If you
Mhm.
look at the history specifically of white women, I know people don't like hearing that, but something like uh, Emmett Till of like
Yes,
that was gaslighting and murder all in one. the
100%.
threat,
And
the
yeah, I
threat that
mean,
they know they can do, and why I hate that people took over the term Karen because that was a very specific thing of
yep.
white women knowing they can use the police to basically execute
Yeah.
black people whenever they feel
Freaking
necessary.
Amy Cooper's over here of the world and the freaking, whatever
Yeah.
it's yeah.
I understand that in this instance that it was mostly not mostly it was entirely meant for
Of
men, and
course.
I acknowledge that that's true and that's
Yep.
how we started. But as you brought it up, that it can also apply racially, and I agree
Yeah.
wholeheartedly.
And I agree wholeheartedly. It is a response, an insecure response to a threat from someone perceived to be below you, right? In terms of hierarchy or whatever it, and this is what racism is. It's just like, hey, my race is above yours. You can't do that to me. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, this is fun. This is gonna be terrible. Absolutely awful. Because it's using um structures and systems and everything like that against people just based on I can lie about this and people will believe me
Mm-hmm.
just based on that alone. No one's going to believe you. Been there
Yeah.
multiple times. Not fun.
So
Sucks.
then we see Rhodey sharing the information with the president that
Yep.
like as we talked about, leading me to believe that he wasn't part of that coup, that he is just
Exactly.
still on board with Gravik's plan.
Very much so.
And the president says what we would expect him to say, which was, I don't know about that. That just seems like World War III. It doesn't
Yeah.
seem like it's worth it.
That seems that was the funniest reaction. I'm like, this is a good president. There's like at least like pushback on the idea
He's
and
like,
of like it's like
this
I don't
feels like I don't.
know. It's like, well, all these countries are supporting you, and as soon as we got the, I'm like, and he's like, but we're the ones
Yeah.
firing the nuke. It's everyone else can support you, and then be like, but we're the ones doing it. So, I like that he's pushing back against that intelligence.
Yeah. Then we see Fury get a call from Gravik, which
Mhm.
I did like this scene of
Oh
the
yeah,
whole, oh, you think you're ahead of me. And it's like, no, how could I? This is what I talk about when I mean, like, when you know Fury is gaming somebody. Like, it's
yep.
very, and I don't mean in like a bad performance way. It's,
Mhm.
he has a different demeanor when he's trying to game someone. Or I say that in the sense of for the ease of cinematic language,
Correct.
not saying that there's no way he could ever switch it up in real life. It's just
Mhm.
more if you need your audience to understand the rules, so to speak.
Yeah,
It would
yeah.
be
There's
easier if you gave him a language, and I don't mean just words, just like
Mhm.
the physicality and everything in how he's delivering his lines of when he's gaming
Yeah.
somebody.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is I think this rings true in most of his performances, but when he's trying to game someone, he really lingers on the words. He draws out a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the things, right? And he's just like the way he's like, "No, I can't be ahead of you." I'm
Yeah,
like, "There you go. That's him gaming people." Like he would not have that response if he did. I'm like, "Yep, it's a very clear-cut cue."
yeah, like it's
Definitely
just
what he would use to scam you out of millions of dollars in poker, though. Like I
yeah,
don't
like it's
trust him.
just there's no sincerity there. Like we can
Yep.
see the lack of sincerity.
Yep.
Um, and they basically set the terms of like
Parlay.
Gravik saying, "If you give me the harvest, this all
Yeah.
ends."
Which is
And
completely false.
I
Give me
guess
the
now I
ultimate
just
weapon.
can't say what I think Gravik would do because of how they wrote him in this episode. Like I'm just like, what
Mhm.
I thought I had a better read on him, but this kind of threw things off. Like this episode threw things off, where I'm just like, he could be lying, he could be not. It doesn't really matter at this point because it doesn't seem like they've written a consistent character at this point.
No, it seems like they've written a character that's trying to do parallels on I don't it's, oh Hitler, where there's like that like de-evolution towards the end of like sanity and all that kind of stuff, and how very few people supported him, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not trying to say like that's what they're doing here, but they're clearly writing a character that's losing its grip. And toward the end, that's what was happening there. I don't know if they're doing that, and his paranoia of like nobody supports me, there's mutinies, and I have to scare everyone and call them names and whatever. But it's Graphic is not a threat at this point to me, except for physical, because based on the trailers, we know he fights Fury, or who we think is Fury.
Yeah, it seems like more Rava Rhodey is the true threat here, because Rava Rhodey's executing and hasn't really missed yet.
Yep.
The guy from Black Widow shows up on the plane. I'm like, oh, that's nice. Like, I think they owe you this. Like, you need to be showing up way more, because I genuinely, when that movie was coming out, I genuinely thought that guy was Taskmaster. And then when the movie came out, I was like, so he's just nothing. Like, this is nothing.
He's just a like, dude.
I hope you got paid well. I hope you had fun working on the movie, but like, okay. This is it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad he showed up again. This episode did seem pretty... Obviously later we'll see more, but like kind of in debt to Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff.
I agree. They really want to draw on the Black Widow stuff, and it's just I don't know if it's like
they already had Draco earlier in the season. Too, a reference to it.
Yeah, they had a few references back to the Black Widow movie and all that kind of stuff.
So and I'm like, Yelena's going to show up at the end of this.
Oh, it's a big possibility.
I doubt it, but like I would love it. I was happy to see this guy. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce this guy's last name. His name's like O-T, like O-T. It's not even like O.T.
Oh my god, like I would not.
Fabignail or something like that.
Wait, is that a click? Like, because
no,
isn't
I don't know. I'm not gonna put that out there. I don't know.
I heard that like it was just written as an abbreviation. I'm like, what? That can't be right. Either way, that's just extremely uneducated on my part. But I wouldn't know how to pronounce that either. Like how I would have to be like, here's another interviewer that said it.
Yeah. Either way, he's great. I'm glad he was in this. He didn't get a thank you, which was kind of really ridiculous.
You're right. No special thanks in the.
No. I mean that Fury didn't say thank you when he gave him his stuff.
It's on brand.
I loved when he waited for it, and I think that was a callback to the movie, but I don't remember the movie. I think that was like a thing that he was on Natasha about, like no thank yous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was good. That Fury is off to Finland after a nice guest, and he does get a special guest star. In the show.
Okay. Fair enough.
He's right after Colby Smulders, who's technically had a credit in each episode. I feel like that's how they did that. They're just like, I don't know, just show the footage every time. Then people won't be able to tell she dies because she's listed. Because she's listed in every episode,
every single episode. Oh boy, oh man.
Yeah. So that's him off to Finland. I really like what comes next. I think this is the Gaia and Priscilla stuff. So Gaia gets to Priscilla. She's kind of like
Taylor's body.
Like the last thing I said to him was like shitty. And I like Priscilla's response, which is like, "Well, it was said because you thought you were going to see him again." Like that's exactly what someone would say if they assumed they were going to have a chance to apologize for it or make it up to him later.
Yep.
And I like that she talks about what her, well, obviously not the regret now that we've seen the thing about like before that, which was kind of giving Fury shit right before he snapped. Like we all have these regrets. Like that's part of giving yourself to someone in a relationship. Obviously, it's not completely romantic. That's not the point of that conversation. But just when you are when you do love someone and care for someone, that's part of it as well. You say things you don't mean, and you just feel like you're gonna get back to them. And I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't characterize it as say things you don't mean, but you're mean because you think you can get back to it.
Yeah, the assumption is never that this is the last thing
you're gonna say.
They're gonna say to someone, right? There's gonna be like, no, the always, even now when I get mad at people, I'm like, and I've thought about this because I'm morbid, that I'm like, if I were to die, that would be the last thing I said to this person. I'm like, that's a sucky way to leave every interaction. So now that I'm like, no, you know what? If I'm upset at someone, I'm going to be better about it now and be like, hey, you know what? This really upset me. All this, whatever. I'll do my thing. But I can understand where she's coming from. And I can understand like the idea of, yes, that there is an assumption of if I say, fuck you, I do assume that I'm able to say sorry again at some point in the future. Right. And that's like she says, like it's just reflective of her naivety.
Yes, well, yeah, I wanted to get into that because we do see the barrel and Guy being like, I don't even know how to speak the language. So then,
yes,
Priscilla, I'm sure people were like, oh no, do a language like Dothraki, and she was like, no, I'm not doing that again. Get the other actress to do it. So Priscilla, they do the whole ceremony, and then they're talking about like, because when Gaia first gets there, Priscilla's like, what, are you the one they sent to kill me? And she's like, no, and they get to come back to that conversation of like, wait, why are you here? Like, why would you, if you're breaking
you're
away
gonna
from them,
killed,
like, why would you agree to the tradition of staying so they can execute you? And I really like Priscilla talking about like, I would rather face them in my happiness. Like, this is where I'm happiest. This is, I got to watch. This was a place that had three things that Nick Fury loves, which was the privacy, security, and light. You got to sit in the light for hours. I would get lost. And as you alluded to, Gaia tries to get a jab in there. Like, oh, well, did he get lost in looking at you in your true form? And I love the way she played it before she even said anything, which was, we know that's a sticking point for her. And she reacts, and all of that is in her like full body reaction to that sticking point of like, I don't know. I didn't have a chance to do that, and I took that away from myself. And I didn't really like the response I got from him when we talked about it last. I thought just that was great acting. Just that before she said anything, the whole sentence, the whole thought was like running through her whole body. You already knew what was going on.
The physicality in her acting before anything left her lips was like, oh, I've been there. I've been there where as a person, you pride yourself on being so cool, calm, collected. But there is that one nerve that when like, and there is like, no matter how cool, calm you are, there is a like physical reaction. And that was done so beautifully. And it's a shame that we probably won't see this actress again in this, but I mean,
I can see her being in the last episode, but I don't.
No. I mean, like
she'll get a chance
in another MCU thing. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's not like a Loki season 2 thing or whatever.
Sure, I think but I don't think I would bet on her not seeing her again.
Right, but I mean, the idea of her being such a strong performer in these subtle regards of like, no, only people of color that have had these discussions before will know what that's like, because I've been there before. I've been like, yeah, I've had to mute my Asianness in relationships, and that was a mistake on my part. And like, and being when I was called out for that, the response that I had was so similar, and I'm like, because there's anger at yourself within that too, and she does it so beautifully. And she's like, you don't understand. And I love what she says. What's required, like the commitment to make a relation. I'm like, yes, everyone's sacrificing something, but in that regard, you don't want to ever be reminded of what you're sacrificing. And
I like that guy. I was like, oh, I didn't mean to offend, and she's like, you did.
You did.
You're young.
Yes,
you could add white, but you're young and you think you know everything.
Yep.
So
and privileged, because I'm glad you pointed out white, because I'm like, yep. Even though they're Skrull, they're clearly playing that
part. If she had said, I wouldn't have been able to go with that, because I'm like, she's still playing a Skrull that has to use this. So like, and she's playing a Skrull that would rather look like a Skrull than be the white person she is. But
Right.
I think, as we talk about these allegories, that
Mhm.
yes, the fact that it's Amelia Clark telling that to
Yes.
Charlene Woodard is like,
Yep.
it's great. It's just great stuff.
100%. 100%. It says so much about like what you said about earlier about like white women. It's just like, oh, white women co-opted feminism in their regard. And I'm like, no, can we remember who started it? And it's like, you can't lecture me about this shit. And I'm like, okay, good. Yes. So much said
Uh,
in this scene. Love it.
yeah, great action scene for both of them. Or maybe
Yeah.
you don't like it, but I thought like good. I think this was, maybe they thought they could do a lot of like killing women ahead of time because they knew they had this later in the season.
Yikes. That's a dangerous precedent to entertain, but I see how you would think that. How they would think that. Sorry,
I
not
like these scene outside of that thought. That thought makes it feel like a bummer. I'm
right.
not saying I liked it because, you know, now it justifies all the shit they did before. It's more just
Yeah.
in the moment I was taken in and appreciated that these two women were able to take care of themselves, and
Yeah.
it was no longer, and it wasn't played as like, oh no, like hopefully Nick Fury gets there, or like if only Talos was here, it's played like, oh no, like these are two women that can take care of themselves, and
Oh, yes.
this is just, it can just play as an action scene, which isn't always the case. Like sometimes it's played as like, oh no, like this force that's coming in and they desperately have to figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like you could have, I shouldn't say that, it felt as though this was shot as if it was a male protagonist doing it, and all you're doing is displaying their expertise as opposed to framing it as, oh no, they're in trouble. This was just like, all right, like watch them go to work. So I appreciated that part of it, but the other section I talked about or the other thought I was talking about of, if they thought like, people will like the show because we've got this in our back pocket, so everything else we do is fine, is a bummer.
It would be a bummer because what's that score card that they do where they assess women on screen that like Fast and the Furious, like the first few like absolutely failed about, and then like there's, I remember one of the indexes where it's like,
test?
yes, the Bechdel test. And it felt like they're like, we ran the Bechdel test for the entire season. Don't worry, fellas, we've got something juicy. If that was the plan, then I'm like, yeah, I'm with you. I'm like, that's not great. How about we just really write female characters well from the start? Like, let's just not use them as writing devices because they're female. That sucks.
So then we see Fury landing in Finland, and I was genuinely like, is he wearing makeup? But no, it was just it was a widow veil, like a Black Widow callback.
Sure.
And then this is where we get into me being like, why did they do this to the Sonya character? Which is, she genuinely had no clue that Rhodey was a Skrull. I'm just like, that just can't be right. That just can't be right that she would have no clue.
Yeah, I didn't like that aspect. I'm like, she should have been more prepared at that point, I feel,
like, you think that they're only infiltrating your government? Like, it just I don't know, it felt weird that they, and I'm not saying I have a fix for it, it just felt weird that she's so, and I feel like it comes across in her performance as well, that she's not truly committed. Like, everything she does is so like perfectly executed that when she goes, oh, he is, like, I'm just like, oh, like, this is the first time I haven't been like, wow, that's some good acting. It was just like,
right.
I feel like even the actress was like, what? How would my character not know or have a suspicion?
Yeah, it's weird because I'm just like, and again, this is me trying to give the show a lot. I'm like, is this a Brexit commentary where like, this is what happens when you try to think that you're isolated? You're not. I don't know, but yeah, that felt weird to me. 100%. 100% that felt weird. I'm like, I would have expected something more along the lines of, so my intel was correct. All that kind of like that reaction, as opposed to like genuine, like, oh my God, Rhodey? And just because
really?
it's
What? That's crazy. So yeah, I didn't like that. But we learn what the harvest is, which is, at first I thought he meant the Battle of New York, but he said Battle of Earth, meaning it has to be Endgame.
Because
the
Avengers,
almost everyone dropped blood, including Carol Danvers.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, like, did she like secretly come back? Like, is this like when we found out that the ancient one was part of the battle, or like? But like, it's like no, he said of Earth, like, and they've done a
Oh,
good
because
job
you
of being
thought New
like New
York. Right,
York
right, right,
versus.
right.
So it must be Endgame. That makes sense. We saw
Yeah.
Carol Danvers there.
Blow up his
Um,
ship.
so they collected all that DNA, and I understand why
It's
he did it, but
all
it
on
really is
him.
truly like what a stupid idea to do
What a
that.
dumb,
Like,
dumb move, man.
because to me it would be like we collected it and destroyed it so that no one could ever. But no, he's like, no, we just collected it. We'll see what happens with it.
Right. It just, oh,
I'm like,
God.
oh no.
And then here's the thing: and this is the part that sucks too. It's like we collected it, and then I checked out after what's its face, the
That's
Spider-Man
why the
movie.
timing kind
I
of
checked,
sucks. It's
and I'm
kind
like,
of just
this,
like you
this,
what? That's
you
a bad
really
time to
dropped the
leave, buddy.
ball bad. Yeah, you really, really dropped the ball bad on that. It's oh yikes! I'm like,
Yeah,
oh yeah, this is all on you. This when he was like, why do you think I came back? I'm like, you should have come back earlier, man. This
yeah, yeah.
this is a big ass mess. You
Uh,
screwed up.
and then the other thing I didn't like, I think they got away with. As I said, I actually commended them on addressing why you wouldn't bring the Avengers in. But then when she's like, seriously, why aren't you bringing the Avengers in? And
Yes.
his just the reasoning, like I think it's a good speech. He pulls it off, like it's well acted. But I'm just like, you're
It's
spending too much time on this and too much time for me to be like, just bring them in. This is
yeah.
if that's actually your reason why. Like before, when you were like, well, we don't want them to be cloned, and I can believe that you think you're gonna bring them in later when you have a better sense of things.
Yes.
That's better than this of him be like, nah, I think it just has to be me. I'm like, why? You suck right now. Why
Yeah,
would
you
it be you?
suck.
Why
It's just
would it
like
be
you
you?
I agree with that. It's just like there's no part of this that's just like, yeah, I'm my old self back. I'm like, no, you just
Yeah, like
you
even
got a
if he thought
little
it was
bit more
his old stuff, the whole
information.
point of this show has been showing him like how much he uses other people,
Yes.
and like I understand that you could argue, well, he just didn't learn his lesson, but it's just like then we're getting into the like what really threw me off about Loki, which is we go on this like 4 hour adventure of like introspection, only to have in Loki's case them create it so he can't really learn from what happened in those
So
previous. And then this is just like, no, he just didn't learn, and I'm like,
y-
okay,
you know
like
what I this is what my biggest concern about this whole series was going to be, and like the middle parts where I'm like, oh, they're exploring narcissism right now. That's what they're doing. They're
mhm.
calling out older generations and all their narcissistic crap, and they're not doing anything differently. And I'm like, okay, that's very, very on the nose with what's happening right now. But that's just, it's not good. He's show us that this Fury is going to do something different. We know he's going to be in
And
other stuff like
I
the
do want
Marvels.
to point out that during our Quantum Mania episode, I talked
Yeah.
about why I liked that um, Janet like kept trying to like obscure the truth,
Yes.
because that didn't feel like her not learning. That just felt like, oh, she's just in denial. Like
Yes.
and
She's delusional
and like
about
you
it.
talked about, like the older generations being like, well, no, it has to be this way, and I'm not gonna. Like, you're
Mhm.
just like making things worse by talking about it. I
Yeah.
think that plays better into not learning your, and even taking a step further of
Mm-hmm.
um Scott Lang being like, I'm just gonna pretend like this isn't. I'm gonna look the other way. That felt in line with the story they were telling, which is
Yes.
people in power trying to keep that power by looking the other way and not
Mm-hmm.
helping people in need.
Yep.
And Scott Lang desperately needing to feel like he can keep this power and look
Mm-hmm.
the other way. And because of how MCU works, and like, well, yeah, that's just he's gonna have to pay for that the next time we see him. And
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. Like
That's great meta writing. Here,
yeah,
it just feels like, no, we're
but
getting back
yeah,
to the
like this
old
doesn't
Fury.
feel like he's aware of what's wrong and is just like, well, it just feels like he's like actually thinking he's doing the right thing without
Exactly.
like, yeah. I think that's the difference for me. In case people think
Mhm.
I'm being a hypocrite, I think the difference for me is I see this as him again. It just really comes down to this episode and the characterization of, we already saw him in the first 4 episodes making minor changes in how he reacts to things and how
Yes.
he speaks on things, and then this feels like he's like,
Fully
no,
back.
like it just can only be me, and I'm like, but
Yeah.
you know it can't be. And that's not really like what? Like you're gonna do this and like everyone fucking dies because you're like, well, I guess it wasn't enough. I guess I wasn't enough.
Because I mean, like, what's the payoff now that he says thank you to someone? Because like, genuinely, if he did that to the Black Widow guy, I forget his name, but if he genuinely said,
don't know that character name.
Yeah, I don't know his name, but if Fury said like thank you after he was called out on not saying thank you, I would have been like, this is okay, we're going somewhere. Like, that's small, I get it, but huge from a narcissist standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this is actually exploring, is like narcissism and the resulting actions of that, and how it's not one person, the lone wolf idea. It's like, no. Who fed you? Who did this? Who did this? Who, like, everyone's supporting you. Everyone's boots to the ground doing this shit while you're getting the promotions. You're building up this delusion. You're ahead and showing off, right? So I love that. That was, and the biggest concern, I'm like, once I realized they were exploring that, I'm like, okay, I really hope they don't land where narcissists usually land, which is they learn a lesson to get the job done and then they go back to what they used to do. And I'm like, oh, damn, that sucks. If that's
and
what
this feels
is
like
actually
he didn't
happening.
learn a lesson, because I actually wouldn't have a problem with them landing on that, because this just feels like he hasn't learned a lesson yet.
I agree.
This just feels like, if, as I said, if it was one thing where I looked at it as the character protecting themselves, even though they're well aware that they need to change, that would be different than him just being like, nah, this is just all on me. I'm like, that's just, that you shouldn't have gone back to that idea of where the Avengers. I understand that Sonya would ask, but it was just like you spent too much time on it, and now I'm just like, that just seems like a bad idea to not bring them in. Like,
I 100% agree, because at this point I'm like, you've established the stakes of what this is, and what we already know is, okay, super Skrulls exist. You don't have powers. You got a trench jacket again. You have an eye patch again. And you got one gun. Like, what? You're not. This guy's completely delusional to think like, oh yeah, this is a good idea. Not call backup right now. Like, what?
Yeah, because I've seen people be like, who is he calling at them? Like, I'm just assuming Gravik. Like, I can only assume he's calling Gravik to be
he's like, I'm ready to meet
let's
now.
go do this now.
Here's the coordinates. Let's do our thing. Like, 100%. 100%. And I'm just like, cool. Maybe he's got something. I'm like, but at this point, it's just, I'm not going to be enthused for the final episode right now. I'm just going to say that right off the bat, because it's my biggest fear of working out.
Well, I'm still excited for the final episode, but we'll see where they land.
Okay, I shouldn't say
about
enthused.
This way too long.
I should definitely say I'm concerned. But yeah, we have talked about this very
no,
long.
I don't mean this point. I mean this episode. We're going into hour and 10 minutes now, and episodes, like, we've gone more than double the episode.
I know, there's so much to talk about because there's so little in this episode. Damn it.
But yeah, we'll be back next week, and we will rate the full season. We will talk about this specific episode. It will be different. It's not a rating for the last episode. It's a rating for the whole season, as you know. But yeah, we'll be back next week. And in the meantime, we are part of the That Shelf Podcast Network with other great shows like Bad Game Movies, Contra Zoom Pod, Springfield Googleplex. So great shows. Go to thatshelf.com. You'll find those shows, our show, and more shows. Go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten for older episodes. And we're on all the podcast platforms, so please rate, review, subscribe, follow, share with your friends on those, and Twitter, Instagram, Threads, it's all at TDF Spoiled, so get in touch with us there, and you can email us as well, spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. Perfect.
Yep.
There we go.
Yep.
Bye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.